balancing security, privacy, and resilience against cyber threats.
Thank you very much for being here. We have an interesting panel, and we're not going to make this too boring. We're going to really start focusing on some of the events that have been happening related to cybersecurity, relating phishing attacks, and many other things surrounding, let's say, the technology. So this is not just for an IT department to basically say, what can I learn from this? This is especially for all of you guys that basically are running operations in order to try to understand how serious the situation is. And I know you've been warned a million times, but we're going to come here with some live examples and some real situations that are truly mind-boggling and that as a result have a major impact on any operation, in this case, of course, of the people that were attacked. So let me introduce the panel. Everybody can introduce themselves a little bit more. I'm Harmen Brenninkmeijer. I run a company called NYCE. We represent 50+ companies in the world of gaming, iGaming, land-based lotteries across the world, and we have a very large sales network of different people in every corner of the world where they basically advise and push product that we think is extremely innovative. So we, let's say, are working on the first and second level and trying to get the better companies to join us in order to get the exposure worldwide. Peter.
Hello, hello. Yes, my name is Peter Wilson. I'll introduce myself very quickly. I'm a regulatory lawyer. I've been providing services to the gambling industry, and I'm a white-collar defense lawyer. I've been doing this for about 30 years. So basically, in a nutshell, I either get people out of trouble or sometimes I cause trouble for people. So that's me.
Hi, it's Ivan. I come from Video Malta, the 5th largest professional service company in both Malta and the world. And I am Director of Advisory and Assurance in Technology.
Hi, I'm Francesca. I'm from NOUV. Basically, we help people see how they can improve their cyber security overall, and we also help consult in how to implement privacy measures.
Hello, I'm Kris. I've just realized I'm not actually as red as I look on my photo, so I need to do something about that. I work at Sumsub. I'm responsible for anti-fraud specifically, but also onboarding and KYC. Work on the product. My experience previously is with operators, including Entain and PokerStars for about 15 years. And that's me.
Excellent. So at the moment, we're living in a world where everybody is going digital, everybody goes online. Most of the IT departments will tell the CFO and the CEO, I got everything under control. Do they? Peter.
Well, I'd like to start by telling a little story of an incident that happened to an unnamed, obviously, client of mine recently. And just to illustrate a typical scenario. So, okay, just imagine this. You're a fairly lowly employee sitting in a branch office, one of 70 branch offices in an organization that employs 20,000 people. It's Friday afternoon. In response to an ad, a recruitment ad, you get yet another CV come in by email. You click on the CV, looks uninteresting, nothing more done, you go home for the weekend. Over the weekend, the IT department notices there's a bit of activity on the network, but, you know, whatever it may be, I don't know what it is, but nobody could be really bothered to look into it too much. Come Monday morning, what happened is this CV had a payload, downloaded malware, locked everyone out the system, encrypted the payroll, encrypted all the details of the 20,000 employees. Everything was inaccessible. A day later, after instructing a tech firm and a law firm, they looked into the system, nothing could be done. There was a £10 million ransom demand, and the company was holding its head in its hands. So what does it do? Well, in this scenario, after they started trying to negotiate through the dark web with the threat actors, as they're called, and whilst that was going on, they had a stroke of luck. One individual in the IT department had actually taken a backup of the systems earlier that week. So they had a backup of a partial backup. And I ought to say, you might say, well, what about the backup that the company does every day and goes off site? Well, that got infected as well. So that was either in the restoration or that was it uploaded, they backed up.
So basically the redundancy alone didn't work.
Yeah, so everything was shut out. So, but the other thing they discovered is that actually this CV with the malware wasn't the first step in the attack, because actually the credentials, the admin password and the user were on sale on the dark web for $106. So somebody had accessed the systems in the past, probably because there was an old redundant password or something.
Okay, so what happened in the end?
Yeah, so I'll bring it to a close, right? So what could you have done about that? So they managed to rebuild their system just by a stroke of luck. What could they have done? Lots of things. So first of all, they could have had dark web monitoring. They could have checked the activity. They would have found that their credentials were for sale. They could have had system monitoring. Sometimes now people use AI to do that, to monitor unusual activity. They could have had employee training to recognize phishing emails. They could have had employee testing.
So Ivan, that's part of what you do. So what exactly would you have done in a situation like this?
Well, in such a situation, very important aspect is having incident management and playbooks, you know? Yeah. And from what Peter is saying in this example, they haven't even had an incident sort of training, so they can't see how they can react fast enough.
So training is going to be absolutely essential. We all know that, but what's the practicality of it? In other words, and I'm going to go to you, Kris, you larger organizations, how do they deal with thousands of people that basically say, how do I train everyone to make sure that they're vigilant?
I think training is just one part of it, right? There's a much bigger picture to tackle here, and what you were describing reminds me of the, I think it was the scattered spider malware attack on MGM and Caesars, which ended up with Caesars paying 15 million in compensation just to get out of that, and BetMGM being down for about 3 days, I think. And this is something that happened in September of 2023 last year. And if we just look at how much AI has progressed since then, and the nature of those attacks, I'm sure there were AI elements in that, but all of this can be done synthetically now. I mean, that was basically social engineering, but we've come so far since then alone. So going back to your original question of, can you go to your CEO and reassure them that everything is under control? I think in the ideal world scenario where you've got an organization which runs like clockwork, with the impending threat of AI, it's still going to be really hard to say everything is under control with any degree of certainty. In fact, I think if anybody's saying that, it's probably a red flag that they're not sure what the threats are in the first place. But, sorry.
Okay, but who do we hold responsible? If I'm C-level and I basically run an operation, the first thing I do is I go to my IT department. That's really the only guy that I feel I could trust. But can I trust him?
Okay, let me be controversial. I think you hold yourself responsible at the C-level, right? Because the IT guys know what they do very well. They do what they've always done. But if at the C-level, you're not pioneering your entire platform in order to be prepared for these new threats, you're doing something wrong. So you're blaming yourself, basically.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But how do we deal with it, right? Zero trust, Francesca. One of your,
Yes, well, I tend to agree with what you were saying as well. I think we have to look at not the people in IT, because they definitely know what they're doing. The people we have to look at is all other involved. So we have to make sure that at the top level, there's that culture of cybersecurity. We have to embed it within our culture, within our company working ways. A way to do this is by implementing the zero trust culture. So you never trust and you always verify. If you keep those simple 4 words in your mind, at C-level, at IT level, any level, you can ensure that cybersecurity is more present. So You adopt ways like, even in simple phishing attacks, you never trust, you always verify. When it comes to the IT guys, when they're giving access rights, when they're creating identities, you start with the approach of, yes, giving them least privilege, starting with assigning only access that is relevant to the roles. But apart from that, you have to make sure to continuously monitor, continuously verify. So that's the way I would tackle it.
Entirely agree with Francesca. And just to add to, I think, both of our points, I don't know Formula One, so I could be talking absolute nonsense. But I think if you're responsible for a Formula One team and you expect the same reliable, trustworthy engineer/mechanic to pioneer your car that you've had for the last 10 years, it's not the mechanic's fault if he's not up to date with the latest tech. It's your fault for not bringing in new mechanics to aid him.
Exactly. That's what
Can I just make a point here? It's not just going up to the board level and making the board aware and, you know, switched into this and so on. That is obviously crucial. But when it comes to zero trust, it's all about having some independence with the IT team. Because I had a scenario I was telling you a few years ago where there was a group of directors and there was a split between the directors. And two of the directors got onto a lowly guy in the IT department and they persuaded him that they needed to look at certain things in the system, and they were given access to the system. And what did they do? They went in and they shut out the other directors. They changed all their mail accounts, they changed the password access, and they effectively took over the company. Because like a lot of gambling companies, and this was a gambling company, all its assets were online. What did we do? In the end, we had to go by the old-fashioned method and injunct the directors and get them to restore the passwords, but that was through a very expensive court process. So there is a thing about, you know, the IT department has to have some independence to make these decisions and has to have some training not to get taken in by directors social engineering, if you want to put it like that.
Just let me ask you one question off the back of that. I'm so sorry, Harmen. Do you think that in a way the training could become a false positive in the sense that you train people so hard to do this, to follow these norms, and then suddenly a deep fake or a synthetic avatar comes along from the very person who trained you telling you to do something different, and now you've been almost coded to trust them even more? Do you think it could backfire in a way?
Well, let's put it this way, and you may agree with this. We're talking about having a plan and a policy. We're talking about 10 or 12 different steps, some technical, some training, some education, some organizational, and there is no perfect answer. But if you have a real problem and you end up having the regulator look at you, if you've got policies in place, you've carried out reasonable procedures, you've got a paper trail, you're much more likely to get out of trouble than if you haven't done anything.
Right, but I mean, that's basically doing an audit on yourself. Make sure that you keep on auditing like you do with your accounting, right? And make sure that as a result you have enough people involved that know what they're doing and that as a result can flag a lot of different things. Then you, as the leaders, have to make sure that you really aggressively attack all these individual points. But resilience is everything, right? And we're basically talking about let's say something that a lot of people can't comprehend or can't understand. You know, we can only understand so much. I'm talking now as, you know, a business owner. I can only understand so much of, let's say, what goes on. I have to start trusting my people. And then at the same token, I'm like, when will I get caught? It's not an if will I get caught. It's just a when. And then what is my process when it happens? And that's fearful. Ivan, you have particular ideas around that, right?
One of the things is prevention, for sure. So I believe the gaming industry needs to have different strategies. And one of the things that worked in other industries was information sharing to prevent threats. Right. So this is something that would involve banding the industry together and making sure that they share intelligence between them. This has worked very well in other industries like the energy sector in Europe, where they have the information and sharing analysis centers, which is even supported by NISA,
right?
The cybersecurity.
Okay. So,
I was just going to mention something just before I forget. There's one truism about technology, is that you can build whatever defenses you like, but there will always be changes which will advance it, even innocent changes. I was recently at a cybersecurity conference, and this guy showed a demonstration of how if you use Microsoft Copilot, which is now being installed on lots of laptops, and you give it the right prompts, it will go and find confidential personal data of companies' intranets.
right. So now we go to privacy. Francesca, another one of your pet subjects.
Yes, so another way we can ensure privacy is by actually embedding it within our product design or our system design, not thinking of it as an afterthought or just because the compliance team told us, listen, there's a new regulation, you have to take care of privatizing certain information. No, privacy should be embedded within our design. We should adopt elements like data minimization, only collecting what we need, retaining it for only the period that we need, and also making sure that for our players especially, we give them view over what data is being processed. We anonymize their data when possible. So in the case of a leak or in the case of a breach, our impact is much less.
Right. So anonymization, yeah. Absolutely. Up front. Any particular ideas where we're going to be in 3 years' time? Sorry, Ivan?
No, I think the iGaming industry needs to go and looking at data tokenization, which is a strategy already being used by the payment industry and accepted by PCI DSS, which basically removes the sensitive data and is stored and encrypted in a specialized secure container.
Right.
So you're removing the sensitive data from systems, and if there are any breaches, the data stolen is useless.
Right, but the gaming industry has a lot of white labels, has a lot of different platform providers, and basically they make their money about making sure that they control or, let's say, are into the database. So what we're saying with this is disconnect and have your own database and make sure that that's your part that can never as such be, you know, let's say, too easily attacked, correct?
Yeah, so it's today data tokenization has sort of matured a lot, so you won't lose on the information you need for the business, but it's a way to protect the sensitivity of the data.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think what you mentioned about containment is really, really important. I think, oh my God, neither of us can say that word, anonymization. I have to really stop and slow down my brain to say it. Anonymization is great as well. I think the issue with that is the more anonymous your players are, the more susceptible you could be to fraud on the platform as well, which means there's more stress put on transaction monitoring. And then the more reliant you are on transaction monitoring, I think the more open you are to AI manipulation. So it could potentially become a fairly vicious circle. And I think one of the other concerns as far as AI, and I know I keep bringing it back to AI, I just feel it's such a looming threat right now in so many ways. And I think that we can talk about what we can do in terms of anti-fraud transaction monitoring until the cows come home. But ultimately, I think we're throwing stones in a war where AI are going to be using missiles. And going forward, I think one of the key things is that we understand why AI is doing what it's doing. And a core focus I think that we should have at the moment is making sure that those AI solutions are transparent so we understand why what's happening is happening the way it is, and so that we can also identify false positives from a human perspective as well.
But do most of the platform providers understand that aspect well enough? Because at the moment, a lot of us are here, you know, either we're on a platform, we're buying a platform, we're improving our platform, but are we really doing what we're supposed to be doing in that particular area?
Absolutely not. And I think another scary thing is regulators don't really understand it either. I think I don't understand it, right? It's something so big, it's something so new, it's something so dynamic. None of us really, and that's the scary thing. At the moment, we're still in control of it. But when we lose that control, what's going to happen? Now, I'm not saying like Skynet level stuff, obviously, that's fiction, I think. But what I am saying is that just from an iGaming perspective, I think it's really important to stay not necessarily in control of what the solutions are, because AI will take over that. I think anyone who's seen AlphaGo that was made 10 years ago would have known that. Right. But just making sure that we program that transparency so we know why the decisions are being made.
Okay. programming transparencies, anonymization, making sure that you have the data, sidetracked, etc. A couple of, major lessons. Anything else that you guys want to add, because we're running out of time?
We're running out of time, but just very quickly, I think we're going to see a growth in state-sponsored or state-affiliated attacks. So to undermine, I mean, we're seeing it now.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a growth of that. And probably we'll see the use of AI in automating those attacks on a wider scale.
I hadn't even thought about what you just said. That makes it infinitely scarier as well.
I mean, it does, because in Asia, that's already happening.
Yeah.
And you see massive involvement of, let's say, the larger parties, that basically are trying to not legalize gaming and somehow prohibit it as it's prohibited and not acting on it.
And my last word on this, if you've read George Orwell's 1984, the vision of the future is a big boot stamping on a head repeatedly. Thank you.
Exactly. Francesca, any last word?
I'm just going to stick with my first 4 words: never trust, always verify, and that should be the way to go.
Right.
I think
Ivan?
cybersecurity should be a continuous commitment, always on the agenda of board of directors and top executives.
Okay, thank you very much. If anybody has any further questions, we're all available for being approached and answering them, and appreciate you being here and taking the time to listen to us. Please take it serious, because this cannot be emphasized enough. We're going to be sitting here in a couple of years' time, and you'll be, what shall I say, hopefully not in a panic mood over everything that has happened, but I think you should be extremely vigilant right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Harmen. Thank you, everyone.